All right, everyone, we're right at 9 o'clock, but we'll wait a few minutes and let everybody drop in. I've seen a few just recently hit the screen. So we'll start our presentation in about 2 minutes. All right, welcome everyone, panelists and attendees to this morning's roundtable discussion. We're going to discuss today the role of cloud security and backups and how they've evolved, how they're changing, where they're going. My name is Andy Purcell. I'm the moderator today. I work at Total Computer Solutions as a business consultant. Been in the IT industry for about 100 years, been at TCS for the last 2. And it's good to have such a distinguished panelist to help me along today. And what I thought we would do to begin with is introduce them to you, and then we'll jump right into the presentation itself. We are obviously doing this via Zoom right now. It will be recorded and disseminated to our clients, and then we're also going to do it via Facebook Live. So you're being broadcasted to the world, which I'm sure makes us all feel great. The PowerPoint presentation will follow along loosely as we do our introductions. And then at the end, we will have question and answer period. So if you would use the Q&A component of Zoom to enter your questions, we will address those later. So with this point, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Paul. Paul is from our partner StorageCraft, and he's just going to take a couple minutes to tell you a little bit about who he is and what his company does, and then we'll move to the panelists after that. So Paul, tell us who you are.
Great, thanks Andy, and I wanted to thank both you and Ashley and the rest of the Total Computer Solutions to actually inviting StorageCraft and being such a great partner. So thanks very much for having me. So my name is Paul Storage. I'm a territory account rep for StorageCraft here in the Carolinas. I manage a territory that goes all the way up from Pennsylvania all the way down to the Carolinas and into Tennessee. So with StorageCraft, you may or may not know us. We're kind of like the secret sauce in the back of the closet that nobody really... Can you guys hear me? Okay, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. If you can't, then you'd probably let me know. But anyway, I was mentioning StorageCraft is kind of like not well known, but we're well known because we actually manage a lot of devices. StorageCraft was basically a company in 2003, took the snapshot technology of Ghost. So if you've ever been around a while and you know the Ghost technology when it came to cloning images regarding clients, servers, and PC workstations back in the day, that technology was actually acquired by StorageCraft in 2003 and became part of our snapshot technology for our storage protect platforms that we currently have now. But what is StorageCraft? We're basically a recovery solution. And so we have both software and hardware, and our software is basically our Shadow Protect, our file backup, our Shadow Protect software, and along with our granular cloud protection regarding O365 and G Suite. So we have about 8 products in our portfolio, which include software, and we also have Image Manager and Shadow Control devices for managed service providers like Total Computer that actually manage the type of devices that might be under their tutelage for you. So we give you the granular details to back up either to another application server that might be on premise, to an application storage target that also might be on premise or maybe in a co-location location, or actually backing up to a cloud, whether it's your cloud, a co-location cloud, or maybe a public cloud like Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud. So we'll get into some of those details there. You see from StorageCraft as the event sponsor here. So obviously Total Computer is a great partner for us in the Carolinas and in the Mid-Atlantic section. So again, we want to thank them for making us part of this program. Obviously, we'll have probably an open mic Q&A at the end if you have any questions. You can also look me up on LinkedIn just by looking at my caricature. That's basically my picture that's on my LinkedIn profile. If you just search my name in LinkedIn, we can connect there and we can start a dialogue. So thanks very much for having me to the program, and I'll give it back to you, Andy.
All right, thank you, Paul. The caricature is an amazing likeness, so I appreciate you providing that. Let's go ahead then and move into our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Larry Guthrie is the first one. Larry, if you'll tell us a little bit about your experience at Cisco and what your background is.
So yeah, I actually came into Cisco through an acquisition of another business called OpenDNS that a lot of people might know. We started as a DNS security, or as a DNS resolution program, and then moved into a DNS security system. I've been with Cisco for probably about 4 or 5 years working in cloud security. I cover Umbrella, obviously, which is the old OpenDNS project, AMP as well, so AMP for endpoint, so antivirus. We also do CloudLock and what's the other one? Oh, why can't I remember? Oh, email as well. So I'm just starting to move into email as well as far as responsibilities. I mainly deal with now commercial, but I've worked with MSPs since I started at OpenDNS and up until just recently. We're transitioning that over to a different team, but I've had a lot of experience working in the MSP industry. And even before that, I worked for another startup called Astaro. That was another small UTM vendor pre-cloud. So we were starting to see more stuff move into the cloud. But yeah, nice to be here, and looking forward to talking to everybody about this.
All right. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Looking forward to your expertise this morning. Next up, Rudy, I'll let you tell a little about yourself. Rudy joins us from SonicWall, obviously providers of firewalls for us, does a great job, wonderful partner for us. And Rudy, tell us about yourself.
So I am often introduced as the smart guy, which is absolutely not true. I started this stuff back in 1982, and I've just broken everything that there is to break, and I know not to do that again. And so my history is I spent most of my time with the Department of Defense. I spent, since 2006, I've been working in cybersecurity. I started working in cybersecurity attack for Department of Defense, trying to figure out how to get into the systems, what are the ways in. And so it was a great chance to come over to SonicWall and work from the other side, having broken into so many things and knowing how easy it is. It was nice to go over and start defending networks and things for a change. So I came to work for SonicWall. SonicWall has been around over 25 years. We're the oldest cybersecurity company in America right now. And so it's been interesting and fun. So I've got to do some other things. I work with the Hacker High School curriculum for ISACOM. I work with ISC Squared in writing test questions for the CISSP exam. And now I am eagerly waiting, hoping that I can last to retirement before we are forced to move to IPv6 because I don't want to learn it. That's it.
All right, thank you, Rudy. Appreciate the background. Our third panelist, Murphy Holderness, is with a local company, marsh&mclennan, who handles cybersecurity insurance. Murphy, if you'll let us know a little bit about you and about Marsh.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for including us today. happy to continue to provide insight where we can. And so a little bit about my background. I previous to working with Marsh, I was with one of the largest commercial carriers in the country, underwriting professional and cyber liability. 6 years ago, I switched over to Marsh, and now we are a consultant for clients working with those carriers to place coverage. It helps me bring a unique perspective in that I know what the underwriters are looking for, and now on the other side, I know how to advise my clients on how to package everything to the underwriter so that we can get the appropriate coverage in place. Cyber insurance is relatively new in terms of insurance products, and I say relatively being past 10 plus years. It continues to evolve as criminals get more advanced. But our goal is to help partner with the other panelists on here to provide protection in the event something does break down or coverage does need to be used.
Excellent. Thank you, Murphy. We will go ahead and move into the questions now. And some of this, as we go through it, we'll jump around from one panelist to the next. And if you have something to offer or something that comes to mind, please jump in and contribute. Really, as we talk about the cloud and its evolution, one of the components that has become more and more critical has been the security in the cloud. And I think that's been one of the things that has maybe held companies back from moving into the cloud. And then more and more recently, we've gotten into how do you back up that data? So sure, it's stored at one of the major suppliers or major vendors that are out there in the cloud industry, but how do we take care of that data? So sort of like to maybe go through the panel again and ask, how did you get into the cloud end of things? And let's go ahead maybe this time and start with Larry, since Cisco has been a leader in so many different areas. Larry, how did you and Cisco become involved in cloud, and specifically with an eye toward security and backups?
I mean, on my side of things, I kind of fell into it. So the company I worked for, Staro, I left them to go work for OpenDNS. And that was when I first started working in a cloud industry. They were typical startup, small, scrappy, and you're looking at a new perspective, as in securing DNS, because nobody was thinking of doing that at the time. Everyone was just like, DNS, we don't need to worry about that. But it was a nice, easy way to start blocking stuff in literally the cloud, because we were blocking it before it came in. And then as time went on, Cisco acquired us, and I'd say it sounds kind of like we're bragging, but we kind of started that kickoff for cloud security for Cisco, because they were kind of sort of pretending like they did security. Even people internally in Cisco, when we started meeting with them, they even said, thank you for giving us an actual security product we can pitch. We started pushing that. They started realizing that the cloud was somewhere they needed to protect. They couldn't just rely on hardware anymore. And it's even more true now with everybody working from home. I think all of us are home. Rudy, you might be in an office for actuality. Nope. Okay.
No, it's a lie. It's a fake background.
I figured as much. Even Cisco, it's like they're saying, we're not even allowed into offices until October of this year. We're not doing any public events until December, I think they just announced. So, even now, today, cloud is even more important with everybody working remotely, with people being at home. And Cisco's one of the products I pitch and the products I work on and support are ones that make it easy for people to secure their users remotely with the snap of with a couple of clicks of the button. So cloud security is critical. I can't comment to backup very much because I haven't touched it. It's not something in my product venue. We use code 42. Sorry, Paul. But that's what we sync up through. And it just works. And I realized I've had to replace my computer 3 or 4 times due to corporate refresh, and backup is great. It just syncs everything over. And I mean, I know from a security perspective, you need good backups, because if you don't have that golden copy and the machine gets compromised, you're going to have to rebuild that whole thing from scratch. And that's a lot of manpower you're losing. That's a lot of hours you lose.
Excellent, Larry. Appreciate it. Rudy, obviously we know SonicWall as a security company. How does cloud affect that? How do you see this from a cloud perspective?
Also early, and again, because of my Department of Defense background, the Department of Defense was wary of the cloud. And a lot of that was because the data was out of our control once it went to the cloud. But now even the United States government is slowly adapting to the cloud. It allows you to get away from infrastructure. I don't have to manage power. I don't have to manage racks. But one of the things that I think, and I think the government does an okay job about this, but most of the other folks don't, and that's anywhere I go, SonicWall, we don't sell backup products, but I ask folks about backups because I'm a cybersecurity guy. I'm there to talk to you about cybersecurity, and it's a huge part of that. And so, you know, if you're not doing backups, let's get it done. I can't sell it to you. I don't have anything to do with it, but you know, we're hit by ransomware. Did you have backups? No. You know, ransomware, you know, stops to matter so much if you got backups. If I can take that stuff that was encrypted and just restore it. And so that's a lot of my frustration sometimes with folks not doing backups, not taking care of things. The cybersecurity side of stuff can get done. But at the end of the day, you know, nobody's going to protect your data but yourself. We talked before about, you know, the wild, wild west, and that's what it is right now, just like it was back in frontier days. And that is there's no cavalry coming. The police are not going to show up to take care of you. You're going to have to defend yourself just like those early pioneers did. And folks aren't really getting that idea yet. And so I'll pause and let you move on to the next guy.
All right. That's great. Murphy, I guess it's a changing world for you too. How has cloud changed what you've done?
Yeah, and so I was thrown in, you know, I'm not a coder, don't have extensive IT background, but through underwriting for the carriers, for providing coverage and advising clients, become very familiar with cloud and security and data protection and backups. It is essential, as Rudy said, to have quality backups. One, it's a requirement now that a lot of the carriers will force you to do and able to provide coverage, because in the event that ransomware does hit you, you know, the best line of defense is, okay, let's hit reset and go to the backup. You know, we've got a plan in place here. It is continuing to evolve where, and we'll touch on this a little later in, who's responsible for the data, who's responsible for the notification costs in the event that there is a breach or it is lost. And that's where the insurance policy in the world has really evolved into the response in the event that there is an incident or a breach.
Outstanding, thank you. Sort of the next thing within cloud security specifically, I'll just throw a question out there to whoever feels best equipped to answer it, but how has it changed the last 5 years, and how do we see the next 5 years moving along within cloud security specifically?
I can take a shot at that if you don't mind, Eddie.
All right.
So again, Paul over at StorageCraft, I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people are looking at, they hear about it, but they don't think it's really going to happen to them. It's almost like the coronavirus. You know, it's okay if everybody else gets it, but I don't think I have to really worry about it as long as I have hand sanitizer and also a face mask. But we're talking to a lot of clients about ransomware because, you know, when I was working with Cisco as an account manager up in New York City back in 2008 when I started there, it was all about ransomware or maybe trying to get hacked, but we always thought that was maybe for some Wall Street or some Madison Avenue big law firm. But it's not the case. It's just a question of whether or not everyone's going to get hacked. And that hack has actually gone down from, you know, the big Madison Avenue kind of Wall Street type of firms, the big brands that are actually going down, all the way down to the individual laptops that are actually getting compromised. So the big thing that we're asking customers is that, what is your ransomware strategy? Do you have one? If you don't have one, that's probably a conversation that we can help you out, because protecting yourself against the bad guys, or just making sure that you have, I'll just say, computer user hygiene, just to make sure that you're not going to get hacked, et cetera. Those are all good practices there. But ultimately, somebody is going to is not going to do something right, or something's going to get compromised, or something is going to cost the firm a lot of money. So that's number one, is probably ransomware. Well, what's your ransomware strategy? And the other thing is that a lot of people have data protection strategies, but they have no confidence that they're actually going to work when they really need them. So how do you actually test your backup strategy? And quite frankly, just because you have some type of backup, it's on a different drive, doesn't necessarily mean, particularly if you're down here in the South, and you got hurricane season coming in, whether or not you're actually going to be protected. Having an offsite type of strategy or data protection, making sure that you have asynchronization in between two locations to make sure that your data is protected, and that's the lifeblood of your organization, is probably very important. The other thing is, and I think what the pandemic has actually taught us a lot about, is that you may not have access to your data. If you can't get to your data center, you can't get to your data that might be housing in an IDF or an MDF or that type of thing, you may not have access to it, and you need to get there because maybe you have to do some type of physical type of attachment or augmentation or some type of firmware that you may not be able to get through the internet because you're basically distanced and locked down. So a lot of people are looking at what their accessibility strategy is for their data. So I think those are three things that are happening that a lot of people need to look at now. And I think those are going to be the strategies over the next 12 to 18 months post-pandemic, how they're actually going to revamp maybe the data recovery and data backup strategy. Thanks, Andy.
Excellent.
So if I can caveat on to some of the things that Paula said. So as an attacker, I will tell you that you can't be too small. If you think that you're too small, the reason I would be interested in you as an attacker, and remember that's my background, I broke into things, is I can now attack from your network, and it doesn't look like it's coming from me. So I can use you as a proxy so that when the FBI shows up at your place, I've got some warning, and I know that, hey, I need to do something. But the other thing is it's a distraction. The other thing is you may have access to other stuff. But if nothing else, if I can't use you for attacks out or anything like that, I can use your computer processing power to do Bitcoin mining and things like that. And so you come in and your entire network's slow and your computers are slow and you don't know why. And it's because I've taken it over and I'm using your processing power for things that you didn't intend, which is causing your man hours to go. Because now, instead of I click on something and it pops right up, you click and you wait, you click and you wait. And that eats into your productivity during the day. The problem with the cloud itself is that we have a very good understanding of how to secure things behind the LAN. You can secure things in the cloud, but nobody's getting educated about that. Nobody's learning about it. And you can't just say, well, it's in Microsoft's cloud, so it's protected, or it's in Amazon's cloud, so it's protected. They do certain protections, but protecting your data, read your end user license agreement, it's still on you. So if you haven't done anything for that, if you're not protecting yourself, then later on, you're going to regret that decision not to check into it.
And to add on to what Rudy's saying, in that end user agreement, you'll want to check to see who is responsible for the data and protecting it from a contractual standpoint. You know, a lot of the policies, the way they read is if there's a breach and it stems from you, then that'll forward out to the you know, if there's a breach and it stems from you, that'll cover you. But if there's a breach coming from the provider, really you should have a contract that states their policy would be in place and protect you as another added layer. Not to mention there's added notification costs and credit monitoring required state by state, where really you need to review the contracts and work with reputable service providers and security firms to make sure it's very clear who is handling what in the event of a breach or an incident.
And to further add to what Rudy was saying, like, as far as, you know, he mentioned the bit mining or the Bitcoin mining. So we've actually seen, you know, command and control servers, when they lock down the machine, mine for Bitcoin while you're trying to recover that machine. So we've seen that happening. We've seen you can actually inject a JSON script into a browser or into a web page, period. And while that tab is open, they could be mining. So you don't even have to be compromised for things like them to utilize your bandwidth for, you know, their own means. And again, you know, it is, hackers are insidious, for lack of a better word. No offense, Rudy.
It's all good. And it's true.
But, you know, they will find any way to get in, and once they get in, getting them out is almost impossible sometimes.
Exactly, yes. But so the FBI will tell you right now, the number one way that you're notified that you've been attacked is by the FBI. So they're the ones that are going to tell you. And at the time that they tell you, because they found your data out there somewhere, you've probably been open and have been monitored for approximately 18 months. So that is government statistics from the United States government. I don't know how well you trust those, but the average person that finds out that they've been breached, they've most of the time been breached for at least 18 months before they're notified. And just like Larry said, once you try to get them out, if you can get me off all 40 of your computers at once, then you might be okay. But if you get me off of 30 of your computers and I have at least one still in there, as soon as I notice that, you know, my command and control center isn't responding anymore, I go right back in there and I reclaim those machines, and you've got to start all over.
And more likely than not, when you
I don't think
reclaim
many
those
people had
machines,
thought about Bitcoin mining being a part of what's going on from a hacking perspective. So it's fascinating, the slowing down the machines. And I think those are just a couple of the challenges that really people hadn't considered. I'd love for you each just to give me a quick opinion. What do you think are greatest challenges today? Maybe Murphy, what do you see as the greatest challenge to operating in the cloud from a corporate perspective?
I can tell you that from, you know, our marketing and working with our carrier partners, an area of large concern going forward is one, that ransomware attacks. You know, the hackers are relentless. They're going after churches, schools, anybody and everybody. It only takes a couple of emails to get in, and, you know, they can cause just as much damage as they can to a larger organization as well. The concerns are making sure that proper security protocols are in place up front, proper backups, and really trying to get out ahead of it as far as possible. But then also the recent surge in mobile devices, which is opening up a lot of portals to everybody's networks. You know, the COVID-19 work from home experiment is just escalating that, where, you know, it used to be everything was confined inside your office walls, connected hardwired to your network. Well, now I know for myself, I can access Marsh's network through my cell phone, through my iPad. And so it's making sure that your security is strong the whole way through on every device, because it only takes one entry point for someone to get in.
Excellent. I'll just continue down my Brady Bunch list of windows that I have in front of me. Rudy, from the other side of things, what do you see as the greatest opportunity for a hacker as we continue to find our way through this cloud existence?
Well, so more people need to become hackers, and I don't mean black hat hackers, and not really hackers in particular. You know, we call ourselves vulnerability specialists. But so right now we have a shortage in skill set. We have a shortage in balance and time to competency. In other words, if I'm a network defender, if I can be trained in 6 months, that's 6 months of time that my network may be vulnerable. So I need to pick a program that gets me trained in 6 weeks. And that's difficult. Most employers, unfortunately, don't want to pay for training. Training is expensive. It's a week-long class. On average, it's $1,200 to $3,000. And most employers back off of that and say, oh, I'm not paying that kind of money. And so your people don't get trained. And if they don't get trained, they don't know what they're doing. And even if you say, well, you know, you've got a college degree in cybersecurity, that's a one-time thing. And the cybersecurity world changes. Whatever you're defending against this week, next week I'm going to find a way around it. Then you'll find a way to block my new way, and then I'll find a way around that. And it's a constant back and forth. You can never get stagnant. And I will tell you that if you're going into the cybersecurity field, you are committing to being a lifelong student. So I talked before about having to learn IPv6, but the truth is I have to stay on top of everything because there's new attacks being born all the time. And I can't ever sit back and say, well, you know, I'm a carpenter. I've learned to make chairs. I can make a chair for the next 100 years. You can if you're a carpenter, but in cybersecurity, what you learned last week is irrelevant 2 months from now. So I'll pause and let you move on.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul. From a storage standpoint, what are the challenges around cloud and security? You know, what to back up, what not to, where to put it?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question, because I think one of the biggest challenges is what we call unstructured data. You know, when we look at tier 1 application data, you know, we're talking about databases, whether it's SQL, Oracle, SAP, et cetera, right? Those database information files that you're actually storing that could be premise-based or maybe even on the cloud are relatively flat. It's very predictable for a CIO, a CFO, a director of IT to predict what that storage requirement is going to be for the users, right? The problem is really the unstructured data. That's the stuff that you and I create day in and day out. That's the PDF files. That's the Microsoft Office files, the G Suite files, the camera, audio, video files that you say. You know, if you're a director of IT and all of a sudden that's a lot of material that you're actually, that's either part of your function working for a company or maybe not, that you have to protect because people are actually putting it on their own laptops, it's very hard to predict what that storage requirement is going to be, particularly if it's backed up to a central depository. So we help customers and clients to understand the distinction between structured and unstructured data to make it more predictable. So therefore, you don't have cost overloads. So now that impacts obviously the cloud, because anything that I'm trying to predict that might be on-premise based or going to a cloud because I'm co-locating it is also exacerbates the issue a lot. And we help customers try to refine that with our technology solutions around software and hardware.
Excellent. And Larry, what do you see as our greatest challenge from your perspective?
It's twofold. One, making sure that either your network, or not even your network now, your endpoints aren't compromised, and controlling what your end users are putting in the cloud. We've got Dropbox, Google Drive, Azure, there's S3, there's multiple cloud platforms that people can easily sign up for, drop their data in, and access from anywhere, from their phone, from their home laptop, from their grandmother's laptop or their mom's home computer, wherever it is they can access it. It's in the cloud. And if you can't control what they're uploading into there, it's very easy for data, for personal PII, that personal identifying information, to get out there. And then they can leverage that data to further get, to further hack your network or to, compromise other companies or other people.
Excellent. It's somewhat frightening if you start to really think about it. It is the Wild West, as someone mentioned earlier. And I think one of the areas in particular, as we're talking about today, is cloud backups. Think about how many of us use Office 365 from Microsoft, and if you delete a file, it lives there for a period of time. But if you don't have a backup either from them or somebody else, after that period, you're going to lose that deleted file permanently. So I know not everybody here works on the storage side of cloud, but maybe Murphy, have you guys begun to see policies that include a requirement for companies to back up cloud data?
Yeah, a lot of the underwriting is becoming a lot more stringent, where the security protocols and actions being taken pre an event occurring are a lot more stringent. And so it's not necessarily a requirement by every carrier, but the primary carriers we work with are requiring backups. They want it in the cloud or somewhere different. And a real world example of this is we dealt with a claim last week where someone's system got locked up by a crypto locker through ransomware. And they were demanding $150,000 in Bitcoin payment. Well, the client had such great security backups and security procedures in place that they were confident enough after doing a review with the insurance carrier that they could pinpoint the day that the ransomware came in, and they had a backup from the day before, that they did not pay the ransom, and they went back and restored their backup from 2 days prior. So that's a live example of where having the backup worked. It saved them from incurring $150,000 loss on their insurance policy, which then would have equated to increased premiums for them down the road. And so the carriers at the same time are trying to protect their bottom line, and they are implementing these and pushing these procedures onto their clients, because at the end of the day, every backup could help prevent them from having to pay out a claim. So you'll see continued, I'm trying to phrase it correctly, you'll see more stringent underwriting requirements, and one of those that's a big focus right now is cloud backups and having everything properly secured.
That's pretty interesting to see. In some ways, the insurance industry is almost leading that, whereas corporately, folks are not doing as much. Paul, from a storage perspective, are you seeing or you're encouraging more folks to back up their cloud data?
Well, if they're backing up their cloud data, at least that they have another point where they can actually pull it back to a premise. But we're encouraging a lot of customers, if they can do it and can afford it, of course, is to back up to multiple sites because sometimes you want to be in different grids, sometimes you want to be north-south or east-west type of corridors just for redundancy and follow the sun type of technologies. Can't always be done. But for some of our bigger clients, and they have that type of breadth, and it really is dependent upon how paranoid they want to be in protecting their data. And most people are, but there's got to be a cost, and obviously between a cost of security and accessibility model or weight to how it's actually done. But yeah, multiple sites. Multiple clouds is certainly the way to go, and we have the ability to replicate and asynchronize in between IDF or co-locations to make sure that we're not overriding data.
Excellent. I know for Rudy and Larry, you guys said you don't directly work with cloud backup, but what do you see some of those challenges in the coming years being as far as how that cloud data needs to be looked at maybe as carefully as we look at our local data?
Larry, you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You can go first, Rudy. You sound smarter than me half the time, so I'm good with that.
I told you, I'm just old. That's all it is. So let me check the question again. So you're asking about, I'm sorry.
Okay, even though you may not touch the cloud backup a lot today, what do you see the future holding? And what are the challenges going forward for needing backup and protecting it?
So I don't think very many folks right now, and I'm sure if you talk to Paul, he will tell you the same thing, and that is, so your backups at rest, they need to be encrypted. So a lot of times folks are like, how did my stuff get out there? I'm poring over my logs. I can't find anything where anybody got it. No, I got your backup. I restored it on my side, and that's how I got your data. And so if you aren't encrypting your backups, that's some vulnerability that you need to think about. So it needs to be encrypted even at rest, because if I can get access to your backups, then that's a problem. A lot of folks don't think about that. And also, and Paul mentioned this earlier, is I've got my backups, they're encrypted. Then you go to restore those backups and it doesn't work. And so your solution, after you've encrypted it, you have to be able to decrypt it and restore those things. And so that's one of the major challenges that I see. And then the other thing is just getting people to understand that it's important, because I feel like for 30 years we've been saying back your stuff up, and folks still aren't getting it. And because we have snapshots, I've seen lots of folks say, well, I've got a snapshot, so I'll just restore to that snapshot. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, especially with your databases, because if I'm restoring to a snapshot of a database can slowly corrupt over time. So if I restore it to last week when it worked, then I've got about, a week's worth of time before it corrupts again. And so just, thinking about these things and understanding them and getting educated. Folks just, nobody wants to read anymore. And you really, it's called computer science for a reason. We should stop saying it's not rocket science and say it's not computer science, because computer science has gotten just as hard as rocket science.
I mean, the first point I would make is, it's uploading what's important, like backing up the stuff you can't afford to lose first. Then moving into making sure it's in multiple places. I mean, I know personally myself, I've got backups in 3 different places for my own personal stuff at home, just because that way, if one fails, I can go to the other one. If that one fails, I still have my 3rd backup for just in case. That way you're not losing your data, and you're making sure. I haven't had to restore from the 3rd one yet, so I don't know if that one's corrupted or not. I probably should check and see if my backups are correct and can work. So the other piece would be test those backups. Make sure that those backups that you've got those multiple different places you can load and they actually work.
Oh, thank you guys. I think there's some interesting things that are coming out that I know I hadn't considered, and the Bitcoin mining being one, the need for encryption that Larry just mentioned, even of your backup. It sounds very critical in the fact that someone could then steal my backup, and it's just as useful as if they're inside my network. So the encryption I had not really thought of, and then Larry mentioned that needing to back up 2 and 3 copies. I guess we all think about that. We'll do that for our, pictures of kids at home and that sort of thing. But yeah, I heard someone recently on a call talk about a 3-to-1 strategy and have that backup in 3 disparate locations so that you're going to be able to pull it back as needed, depending on whether it's ransomware or a natural disaster or something else that might occur.
Yeah, so on that, if you go to the National Institute of Standards, they actually recommend that you have 1 local copy and 1 copy somewhere else. That way, if your building gets flooded, your local copy is gone. But if you have a copy somewhere else, then you can restore from that.
Yeah, but I think the idea now of having even a 3rd, perhaps at a second cloud location, is more and more critical. So,
yeah, it does. It goes according to your risk assessment. And so if you have a highly sensitive network, then you're going to want to have several. And it's just as simple. So we talked about the database before, but if I am backing up to, and we have talked about folks being in your network for a long time, if I'm backing up something that has already been compromised, then I'm just recreating my problem. So sometimes you do want to go back 2 or 3 backups before you were compromised and take care of things that way. But that's based off of your risk assessment and your budget, because for every backup that I do, I've got to be able to store it. I've got to be able to have enough room for it. And so there's a lot of things to consider. And that's where you call somebody like Paul and you say, okay, sit down and let's talk through my options. And then you can work it out and figure out what your budget should be and where your risk lies.
I was going to say, if only we had a storage expert with us. Paul, assuming money were not an issue for a client, how many different locations would you guys recommend you place your backups?
So at least 2. So and that could be premise-based, maybe for the organization. So for instance, like in StorageCraft, for instance, we run a data center that is run out of Utah, which is basically our headquarters. And then we have one on the east, and we have one on the west for redundancy. So we have actually 3 points for backups. And then obviously for the peaks, valleys, and spikes, we go to Google Cloud. So for those customers that perhaps, because building out a data center is obviously very expensive for compute, labor, IT, storage, and managing, and just power, heating, and cooling, that a lot of our direction for anything going forward is probably going to be into the cloud. So we can scale for the most part in infinitum, which is good. And obviously we allow the Google Cloud, because they're basically worldwide. They can have follow the sun capabilities, and we can provision that. But for the most impact that we're having right now, you need at least 2 locations. And if you really want to be paranoid and money is no option, then I would have at least 3. Some people would say that when it comes to that, you probably need 4 types of backups. 1 for the accountant, 1 for the government, 1 for the real, that's for your business, and 1 for your wife. I don't want to be cynical, but if you want to look at it, some people would say that that's what you need, but that's not the type of practice that I just said that tongue in cheek, but it depends what you want to do, right?
So thank you, guys. So just a quick reminder for the attendees. We do have the Q&A session. I know there's been some discussion going on with a few questions already. Feel free, if you have questions, enter them in the Q&A session, and then we will take time at the end to answer those. So we've talked a little bit about cloud backups, cloud storage, and cloud security. Sort of maybe look the next third of the conversation here toward the future. What do we see just as we enter the next year or two, as we come out of the pandemic, as our world is changing? What do we see the near-term future looking like? And we'll just go in Brady Bunch order again with Murphy. What's your forecast look for 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, there is an alarming uptick in ransomware. It continues to progress and become more prevalent. And so from an insurance perspective, we're going into a unique time where the market is hardening a little bit as losses uptick. And so as we alluded to earlier, you'll see more stringent underwriting requirements, and that is how the carriers are protecting themselves while at the same time protecting the client. At the end of the day, the carriers are trying to make money as well. So you're going to see more requirements that you're doing these cloud backups, where in the past they may have only required you to go to 1 provider. Now you may see 2 to 3 required redundancies. So you'll see some tightening of controls there. And it's really just having to do with the carriers playing catch up to the losses and the increased activity they're seeing on their end.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Rudy, what's your glass glass half full, half empty approach for the next year or so?
So for me, one of the things that folks just don't seem to be getting is that you cannot go to your systems administrator anymore and say, I need you to secure your network, whether it's cloud, whether it's local, or whether it's whatever. In college, the IT degree is not the cybersecurity degree. And so folks are going to sysadmins and they're saying, hey, lock down my network. And it's not what he learns. The skill set is different. And, cyber guys don't learn Active Directory except for how to secure it or how to break into it. And sysadmin guys don't learn, how to use Linux to go in and do weird things with ports. And so we're asking folks to do things that are out of their wheelhouse. And most folks are saying, well, I can't afford that cybersecurity expert. Then you got to outsource it. But you can't, you can't go to an orthopedic surgeon and say, I need you to do brain surgery. It just doesn't cross over. The skill set's not the same. And if you don't have the skill set in-house to do that, then you've got to contract out for that, but you've got to get it somehow. But having somebody work outside their wheelhouse is just going to produce results for you in the end that you won't be happy with. And so hopefully people will change that. They'll get a better idea about that. I preach it everywhere I go. And so I hope the folks in this session will go out and preach that as well.
Absolutely. And for Paul, your crystal ball, what does it look like?
So I think Rudy and also Murphy had some great points too. Just to tap into there. I mean, one of the biggest things that we're seeing, I mentioned earlier in my preamble, was pretty much the ransomware. After you get out of the corporate office, and I think that a lot of things are going to be changing about maybe going back, maybe on a part-time basis, or maybe not going back at all. Right. I think that the commercial real estate industry is going to tank a little bit. And we see that might be happening. So what it basically means is a lot of people are going to be getting on public networks. And I think that's going to be a big play, obviously, for, the security providers to help out there. But the ransomware protection, and you just look up COVID-19 phishing attacks on ransomwares, you can probably see hundreds of articles and situations where this has been impacting there. So hardening the network and making sure that you're locking down your laptops, and also having snapshot protections on your data centers when they're going back to receive information from standard databases. But I think also the future is, one, it's going to be skill set, as Rudy had basically mentioned. Ransomware protection is obviously going to be one, because that's always coming down to the client. And also, I think is that as you get out of the office, it's going to be recovering laptops, right? Laptops are no longer behind the firewalls, maybe in standard corporations inside the home office or headquarters, or robos, remote office, branch office. They're now in the homes, public office spaces, and things like that. So making sure that you have secure connections, making sure that you're not going to get the man in the middle attacks, and also snapshotting your laptops regarding your applications so you can get quick recovery, I think is some of the trends that we're seeing. And I think the longer term is just going to be, how do I automate this? It gets back to some of the things that Rudy had brought up. Where's the skill set? As the skill sets are trying to ramp up, you got to make it easy and for the automation to take over. So I think we'll see a lot of things become more automated, just as we saw over the last 5 or 10 years regarding data center automation. You're going to start seeing end user automations become a lot more proficient over the next 6, 12, or 18 months. That's what we're seeing. We're talking to customers on.
All right, thank you, Paul. Larry, what's your future outlook?
I think they're going to continue pushing things to the cloud. I think I agree with most of the rest of them, or all of the rest. We're going to see more work from home. We're going to see people staying home more. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, even Cisco, no one's in an office right now for Cisco. Like, none of our offices globally, they're all closed. Those are all physical presences that we're not in. The whole company is working from home. There's a fair bit of us, and we're leveraging our solutions. But I think the first point would be, now focus on securing the endpoint. Multiple layers, you get that endpoint locked down, then you get their connection to the office locked down. Then you get that connection from that endpoint into the office, and then back out to the internet locked down. So you're going to be, there's multiple points that we're going to need to start looking at securing and protecting, and making sure that not only is the right data getting out there, but that no one's looking at it, no one's sniffing it, no one's grabbing it.
Excellent. I think if we look at the cloud evolution over time, 5 years ago, we could probably all tell our clients what cloud was and maybe give a pretty good definition. I don't know that we would have envisioned ourselves here 5 years later. So to ask you the impossible, look 5 years ahead. Will everyone be in the cloud? Will it look different? Will the cloud have a different meaning? And we'll go in reverse order this time. So Larry, don't mute yourself again just yet. Let's look long term. Do you guys have any wild predictions for where the cloud will be in 5 years?
It's liking going last. I could copy everybody. Dang it. I would say probably, I think people will start going hybrid. Like they'll still be on-prem. I don't think on-premises is ever going to go away just because we need to keep that data. I mean, I know myself personally, like I've worked from home since I started working for OpenDNS and transferred over to Cisco. So I've always been a remote worker as far as when I worked in cloud, ironically, but myself personally, like most of my personal stuff is hybrid. Like I have the important stuff I have stored on servers. I have, in a closet here. The other stuff is in the cloud. Like, and I think that's going to be the way a lot of people are going to go is just your really critical, important stuff, keep on premises. And then the rest of the stuff you put in the cloud, because the best way to secure your information, your data, your important stuff is to keep it on premises where, you have physical access to it, for lack of a better word.
Paul, it looks like the world is coming to you as we do more and more cloud. It becomes more critical, and we're just keeping it, as I mentioned, a backup or a local copy for our personal reasons. Paul, where do you see the cloud moving over the next 5 years?
If I look back at my tutelage, particularly with Cisco, John Chambers said at one point in time that voice was going to become free. And when he said that 15, 20 years ago, I figure you can probably look that statement up, it kind of shocked the industry. But, usually when John Chambers talks, people listen. He's probably one of the most acute and steward, most respected CEOs in the last, 75 years anyway. But, what he said, and I think the cloud is going to come to that to a certain extent. It's not going to be completely free, but it's going to become this kind of like sixth or seventh utility. And there's going to be a certain portion that it's free. We see it now. And I think it's just going to have, as more people adopt it, I think that you're going to see and people have more confidence in it. It's going to get adopted, it's going to grow, and it's going to get less expensive over time, just like voice did when it got to be part of a data network. So I think that's kind of like the long-term thing that we're seeing.
All right, excellent. And Rudy, for you, it's from a security perspective. What do you think that cloud and its requirement for security are going to be as it becomes maybe free and as it becomes more ubiquitous and as it becomes part of our daily lives? How do you see the security changing around that?
So people are going to have to figure out how this stuff gets secured. And maybe when you are discussing, should we go to the cloud, and you're talking vendors, that's one of the things that you should probably ask about is, okay, we have the cloud, what's available for it? And then look at, most cloud vendors offer some version of security. And so you have to talk to them and ask them, what am I getting for my money? What's there? And then you have to ask yourself, does that meet my requirements? And and you always should start with, what are my requirements? What I really hate, and when I was a young kid, I did the same thing. Hey, they've got this new thing out. Oh, I want that. We don't even need it. Yeah, but I want it. You have to sit down with a requirements list. Don't look at a vendor. Don't look at what they're offering. Sit down and say, what do I need to secure? And Larry brought that up earlier, and that is, where are the keys to my kingdom at, and what am I using to secure that? Once you've decided, what do I need to secure? How does it need to be secured? And, and if I lose it, what's my plan for getting it back? So you have to start on paper first. Once you've got it down on paper and you know what you need to do, then you start looking for security vendors that meet your requirements. Don't ask them what they have. Call them up and say, this is what I need a solution to do. How close can you get me? Generally, when folks call me, I say, just wave a magic wand and pretend that it's magic, and tell me if it was magic, what would it do? And I will get you as close to that as I can with stuff that's not magic. But what I don't want is I don't want people to say, well, I would have asked for this, but I didn't think it was possible, because things are changing every day and we can secure things better today than we ever did. Everybody knows about the Vault 7 stuff. CIA tools were released into the wild and hackers got a hold of it, and suddenly they got much more skilled. Well, we've gone back and we fixed those things. We have security measures for those things now, but folks didn't keep up with that, and they don't realize that we're securing things in new ways. So don't assume that you know what your security provider can give you. Figure out what you need to secure, give them the requirements, and let them tell you how they're going to lock it down. And then just pick what you like.
Thank you, Rudy. So Murphy, no pressure to that. You've had time to prepare an answer with this round.
Yeah.
The world is coming to you as well. Everybody's going to now need a cybersecurity strategy, not just a policy, not just dabbling in it, but a real plan. What do you see your industry doing over the next 5 years?
Yeah, similar to how workers' compensation, property insurance, auto insurance, they're all standard requirements for operating a business, essential must-haves. Cyber is becoming that, where it's becoming almost a part of every single contractual obligation. It is becoming a necessity to have a cyber policy in place to operate a successful business. Along with that, you're seeing the carriers build out their risk management and underwriting protocols where, similar to if you're operating a building, they're going to want you to have sprinkler coverage or sprinklers in there. For cyber, there's going to be basic protections and procedures they want you to have in place. Along those lines, you will see the cloud backups and the security protocols to protect your own data. So I think what you'll see is a shift to the marketplace where cyber policies and insurance really get in the forefront as they become required for almost every business contractual obligation. And so along with that, in order to put the policies in place, the carriers are going to require that you have the protections in place. So I think you'll see a push for people to continue to protect data.
Outstanding, guys. I really appreciate it. That's the bulk of the formal questions. I think maybe just on a personal level, as we begin to wrap up the panel portion of this, love to hear each of you just with a personal tip. In your opinion, what one tip would you give to the attendees and to anyone watching us on Facebook or a recorded situation as they look at the cloud backups, as they look at cloud security, as they look at this ever expanding world? And Larry's mentioned working from home as a great example. We've mentioned Bitcoin mining. We've talked about the need to encrypt. We'll start with Murphy. Just quickly, guys. One tip that you would give all of our people if they took nothing else away that they need to remember.
It seems basic at a high level, but have written procedures down in the event that you do get hacked or have ransomware or an incident occur. A lot of people go, oh, well, I just call my IT guy. Well, okay, that's great. How are you getting his contact information? And they don't realize everything's saved on my computer. I can't find his number or I can't find his email. So do have a written response plan. Time is of the essence in the event something does occur. You want to get the appropriate parties involved as soon as possible. And then part two is review your contracts with your service providers. Be clear over who is responsible for protecting the data, likely on their end as well as your end, and use reputable firms who have experience and background in the industry. It's not something you want to gamble on with your data, because if you come in and can't access it, it is crippling, and we've seen some businesses go through some very harsh times just because they didn't think about it in advance.
Excellent. Rudy, what is your pearl of wisdom for those watching us today?
I don't know that I have a pearl of wisdom, but the best advice that I can give is what I talked about earlier, and that is becoming a lifelong student. And so if you're not willing to become a lifelong student, then you need to hire someone who has become a lifelong student or contract out somebody. But it's an ever-changing landscape. And again, folks don't want to spend money to train their folks, but you really end up spending much less money for training than you do for a breach. I think the Pokemon Institute said that it was $3.5 million is the cost of recovering from a breach. That's $3.5 million that it's not going to payroll. It's just money that you have set on a shelf because, hey, we got breached. You don't want to pay that. So in hindsight, a few $1,000s in training to keep that from happening is economical.
Excellent. And I love the way that Paul keeps looking up like at his ceiling or something, and it looks like he's really paying attention to Rudy very, very closely on my screen. So,
I got too many screens, so I'm trying to multitask here. And I'm seeing the chat window, so I'm trying to respond to some people that were asking some questions. So I'm not trying to be rude.
No, it's great. What piece of advice would you offer as we look to move into this cloud world further?
So I guess that's me still. So I think it comes back to never pay the ransom. I mean, if there's one takeaway I'd like you to take away with, for the people that are actually part of this, never pay the ransom. I think there's some common sense, smart rules that you can actually put to protect your data where you never have to pay these crooks. So, and we can show you that. And if you want, I can actually find some things and maybe put it in the chat window. If there's a distribution afterwards, I can roll it up to both of you for saying it out. And apart from that, I think that's the other thing is, but, and maybe I'll just lead with this or end with this, is that, more of a saying, but something of an inspirational mark. If you're not the lead dog, the view is the same. So anyway, this was really a good session. So I really appreciate, Andy, you having us part of here. So I'll just leave it with that and look forward to the Q&A in a few minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, Larry, you said last time you liked going last, so we're looking for something we can really carry into life with us now.
And it's something simple. Don't be scared of the internet. I mean, yes, as a coworker said, the internet is a scary place, but you don't have to be scared of it. If you're careful, you'll be fine. You get the right security. You make sure you've got antivirus. You've got a good firewall. You've got even IPS. You've got all those different pieces in place. You don't have to be scared of the internet. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you lie down with dogs, you're going to get fleas. So if you're rolling in places you shouldn't be rolling, you're going to get infected. So, you don't have to be scared of the internet. It's not that scary if you're careful.
All right. Well, thank you. I would say that's the formal part of our panel. I know there are a few questions. Any attendees who wants to go ahead and ask additional questions, please type them in. Some of them we've done a pretty good job of answering as we go. So I will ask them out loud just for the benefit of the rest of the group. We had one for Rudy regarding SonicWall, SonicWall's on-premise security versus the virtual SonicWall in the cloud. So Rudy, if you could maybe speak to that would be great.
Yeah, I think that I had a better understanding of that after I reread the question, but my answer is still basically the same. And the question was about virtual firewalls versus physical firewalls. And so anytime you ask a security practitioner about that, you're going to get different answers. And a lot of it depends on, we said before, what are your requirements? And so without knowing what your requirements are, I recommend a physical firewall at the perimeter and a virtual firewall at your data center perimeter. So that virtual firewall would be protecting you from the insider threat. There are a lot of folks that recommend the virtual firewall at the perimeter. For me, I worry about that because if I lose my hypervisor, then I've cut myself entirely off. And so it just depends on what your requirements are. You really have to sit down and do a risk assessment and say, how long can I be down? What can I be down? And work from there. But my out of the box answer is, physical firewall at the perimeter, virtual firewall at the data center. And then, and then what I said earlier in the answer to the question about, the physical firewall, you kind of have to know what you're doing a little bit better because we've got to rack it, we've got to hook it up, we've got to configure it. The virtual firewall, some of those things will be taken care of for you and you can just concentrate on security versus infrastructure. And so that's all I've got for that.
All right, excellent. We've got one that's addressed to Paul. How could StorageCraft's backup compare to Azure's snapshots or one-day image backups?
Yeah, so as far as the backups there, I think that was a message that was actually in the cloud. So in the cloud is that, there are some backup routine policies. You got to look at the fine print there, right? Because there might be some 30-day type of incremental backup or full backup that's happening there, but you got to look at the fine print, because just because you have a backup doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have necessarily the proper protection. With StorageCraft, we can give you granular protection in as little as 90-second snapshot increments. So therefore, and you can have it completely encrypted, so it's immutable against any type of ransomware type of hack. So that is what we help clients with when looking at cloud technologies.
All right, excellent. A Cisco question for Larry. Do you see more tightening or consolidation of Cisco's products as they move off premises and into the cloud?
Yes. Actually, we're trying to stay vendor non-specific, but I guess you don't have the choice. We're actually working on doing that now. We're building out a platform called SecureX, and that is it's our attempt at a single pane of glass as far as from a security and management platform. So you can do things like, depending on what you tie in, you can, if you get an alert from one system, it can pivot over into another system, open up a ticket, notify the appropriate people, take that machine, lock it down, so it's not getting out or getting to anything. Automation, as far as that goes, we're trying to tie everything together into one nice bundle and make it easy to use, which I know I'm pretty sure everyone's sitting, so I know that's a shock coming from Cisco. We're not known for ease of use. I like to comment on that because I come from the outside. But, we're working on making it easier to use, all in one nice, big, pretty bundle. I can't comment on SKUs. I'm sorry, people. I can't comment on that. But I can say, we are trying to make at least the use of the product a whole lot easier to do.
All right, appreciate it. And now, Murphy, just for those here local who may or may not have run into you guys before, you are local in High Point, correct?
So yes and no. I'm in Greensboro. Marsh, we are actually an international company, and so offices all over the world. Our direct offices here in North Carolina are Greensboro, High Point, Charlotte, Raleigh, and Wilmington. We are extremely fluent and can work with anybody nationwide, no state boundaries, and local boots on the ground across the country.
Wonderful. It's even larger than I had expected. That takes care of the questions we have for the moment. If anybody has a last one, please put it in real quick. We do have a giveaway that is for a couple of our users. So I'm going to go to Paul. He may have a comment, but then I'm also going to let him show what our giveaway is.
Okay. So Andy, what I want to do is encourage more questions from the audience. So I have two 30-ounce StorageCraft tumblers. I had one 64-ounce tumbler, but that's reserved to myself because I've only had 10 cups of coffee and probably 5 during this meeting. So anyway, for the next 2 people, I'm the Bob Barker of this seminar, okay? So I can't really be good. The price is right because it's free. All you got to do is ask a question. And then Ashley will send these out to either your home office or your office address. So I'll hand it back to you, Andy.
All right, and I don't know that we have any others, but I can give you the first 2 that drop questions in during our session, and that we may have done ourselves in by answering them as we went along, as opposed to making them hold them to the end. But I think the first 2 I have on my list would be Lisa Hauk from the town of Stokesdale, here just north of us in Greensboro, and then I think the second one will go to Brent Rabe. Brent is with Victory Junction. If you're not familiar with his organization, they do a great job for kids with different disabilities and limitations. And it was originally started and still run by the Richard Petty family. So I'll get you that information, Paul, and we'll have those 2 go to those attendees, and hopefully they will use them if you think kindly of you.
So I got a question for Paul. If we got time, do we have time?
Please
yeah, we do.
Go right ahead.
All right, so
hey, wait, before you go, Randy, since you're asking the question, you're part of the panelists too. I'm going to encourage more questions with the panelists. So you're going to get one of these too. So keep going.
Rudy, good work.
Awesome. So one of the problems that I had when I was a sysadmin, and it's been a while since I've been involved in backups, but so we do our backups, and then we would do our backup to an offsite location. And sometimes that backup got very long. We were backing up, terabytes of data. And then we have the problem of our next backup is kicking off, and yesterday's backup is still running. And so, so I know that there's some new technologies to keep that stuff from happening. I know there are things to kind of compress what gets replicated. So, I mean, what is StorageCraft doing to solve this problem?
No, that's a great question, Randy, because obviously, when you back up to a USB drive, obviously the throughput is a lot better from a local server or a laptop, for that matter, to a local drive as opposed to going over the internet. You're dealing with megabytes as opposed to bits, and obviously that's a long time. What I do want to say is that, when it comes to backup, it's kind of a commodity. Everyone does it. The question is, how fast can you recover? I mean, that's the question that needs to be happening here. And that's where StorageCraft is basically our snapshot technology is, okay, it's a good snapshot, but how do I recover it? And that's where our uber focus is how do we get back online or recover granularly faster, because we know that sometimes doing a full backup increment over the network, particularly if you go into multiple locations, can take a long time. The problem is with compression is that you can recover a file, maybe restoring a server or a laptop. The problem is that once you uncompress and you have to blow that file back up, that can take a long, long, long time to actually do the recovery. We actually have built-in technologies that are built into our programs where our snapshot technologies, we're actually doing almost like a jumbo frame that's going across between the snapshots across there, and you're actually encrypting it actually once it hits the other target location. So therefore it's expanding as it's just hitting the target. So therefore we can almost a 2, if not a 300% increase, get you an RTO and a remote time to access that file a lot quicker. I don't know necessarily the secret sauce that's behind there. It's intellectual property that StorageCraft has developed over since our inception in 2003, but we're very focused upon getting a file or recovering a particular service. One of the things that we actually do is we do virtual boot technology regarding our service. I do know about this one, is that our virtual boot technology that we include in our snapshot technology regarding our server platforms, whether physical or virtual, is what recovers files a lot quicker, which is basically one of our main differentiators that we have in our portfolio. Good question.
Awesome.
All right, thank you guys. That's concludes the questions for now. We've given away all of the hardware that Paul had, and Rudy even earned one with a panelist question. So I appreciate all of your time. It's been invaluable having you guys join us for this. Again, we'll be distributing it to all of the clients that we work with, and obviously from a TCS standpoint, we do these things 2 or 3 times a year, and have been doing so, and it's only because of panelists like you guys that they are so successful. So we may call on you again if you're willing. Attendees, thank you as always for spending your time with us. You're our clients, or hopefully future clients of ours. So thank you for your time. We obviously do a lot of work in this area, not only cloud but also on-premise backup and security, as well as helping you monitor, manage your own networks. So thank you for your faith in us, and we look forward to continuing a relationship with you.
Thanks for having us.
Unless anyone has a last-minute comment or question?
Lock it down.
Well, I just put, I just put in the chat window, if somebody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, by all means, please do that. Look for me on LinkedIn, and I just decided to send all the panelists a Tumblr, so look out for that. And I really wanted to appreciate the questions that were asked for the 2 people in the audience for the questions, so look out for that from us too. Thank you so much for making StorageCraft part of the presentation.
Appreciate it. If anybody has questions, we will be disseminating this. Additional questions, I can contact panelists if we have questions to be answered later. Other than that, everyone have a wonderful day. Stay safe, be healthy, and we'll talk with everybody soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.